Hi folks, Slick Slices here. If you saw my recent teaser video, you will see that I have a friend who has a phenomenal collection of knives who is lending me some of them so that I can do reviews of them and share them with you. He wishes to remain anonymous, but he lives near me and he has this great collection of knives. And the first one that we're going to look at here is a Rockstead. As you will all know, I very much like Rocksteads, and I have two actually, but the one that I have that is directly comparable here is the Higo 2. This is the Higo 1. Now in actual fact, that difference is fairly marginal. What made the Higo 2 different to the Higo 1 in this finish was that the handles are made of titanium rather than duralinium. This one obviously is desert ironwood, so that becomes entirely irrelevant. The Higo 2 version of this now has titanium liners rather than 420 steel. But instead of the desert ironwood, it's got carbon fibre, which I don't think is very attractive. This is actually, I think, probably the most attractive of the Higo style knives that I have seen from Rockstead, and actually I'm quite jealous of this one. The other big difference between this one and my one is that this one is in ZDP189, whereas mine is in YXR7. My Higo, which is the smaller version of the same knife, struggling to open here, is also in ZDP189. I've had these two for well, this one for 2.5 years and this one for about 3 years. This one has had a lot of use and it's got two tiny little chips in it, but it's still razor sharp. This one doesn't have any chips in it. It did get a couple of dull spots which I managed to get out with the strop, but again it's still razor sharp. The reason that these knives hold their edge for such a long time, particularly these ones, is that they're very, very hard. My Higo is about 63 Rockwell, but I say it's YXR7 and DLC finish. My Higo is about 67, and this one I know is exactly 66.8 Rockwell, almost 67 Rockwell, and that is why years from now, even if it's used, and there's no guarantee that you will actually be using it, but even if it was used, it would still be sharp because they're just so hard. Also, people often think the phenomenal degree of polish on these is problem. It's going to get scratched up, isn't it? Well, my Higo, as I say, is very well used, and it is still just as shiny as the day that I got it. And the reason for that is a bit smeary because it's been used, but it's still perfectly shiny. There are some very hairline scratches around that, what they call a shinogi line. I don't think it really is a shinogi line, but it's that change in the bevel. That hard edge means it's more prone to scratching, but these blades are coated in titanium nitride, which has a Rockwell in the 80s, so the chances of them scratching without you taking a diamond to them is actually pretty low. And this one doesn't have that shinogi line. That is the same as my Higo, and not having that line means that there isn't that sort of stress point where it's likely to pick up scratches. So my Higo, despite being one of my most used knives, and you'll recently have seen my video of it, how full of gunk and so forth it was, has not a scratch on it, even under a magnifying glass. That's a function of the diamond-like coating, which again is very, very hard, as well as the hardness of the steel underneath. Anyway, this one, as I say, this is in beautiful, beautiful desert ironwood. He had the choice of two, and they sent him some photographs from Heine Haynes, and he picked the one that he preferred the ironwood of. On the face side I should point out, it's completely clean. There's not even a nut or a bolt. You've got the hole for a lanyard. I quite like lanyards on them. Not everybody is similarly concerned. On the other side, you can't have it completely clean. You've got to have some bolts on it somewhere to take it to bits. There's 2 T8 bolts. I always think this one looks like it's bigger. At least the tooling would be bigger, and this one looks smaller. But that's because this bolt is bigger and this bolt is smaller, and there's an optical effect. But they're both T8. They're both the same. The liners or the frame, because although this is technically speaking a liner lock knife, the liners are thick, heavy H20 steel, which gives it it's really solid. There's no question of of a sort of thin liner lock. It's like one of these sort of bolster locks and things like that. It's really a frame lock with scales on the outside. But internally, there is a huge amount of lightning work that has gone on, so that you've got the periphery of steel and a lattice frame inside to give it some strength, but it's much lighter than you would expect it to be. Even around the cutout here, there's sort of a U-shaped piece of steel come back into the handle, but right up to it, all the bit in the back of here is all lightened out, and it's lightened out even in the lock bar itself has a triangular cutout in it, so that it's not the heavy lump that you would expect it to be when you know that this is 420. It's 420 J2 steel. I don't know the difference between J2 and HC or whatever, but I suspect you want this to be tougher, and hardness is far less of an issue because you're not cutting with this. There's no cutting edge. You want this to be able to bend and deform and reform and deform and reform every time you open and lock the knife without it breaking. So it's you'd want obviously a softer steel. You can actually see from between the scale and the bar there, you can see the triangular cutout. I don't know if it comes over in the video. When I watch this back, I'll wonder if I was showing you everything. It's covered in these sort of bits of jimping, which they're kind of keen on. I never really see the point, but it's there. You've got this jimping all around the base of the knife here. You've got some jimping on the back of the blade there, and also here in the choil you have this jimping. This bit's quite interesting because one of the things I like about these knives is they've cut the edge of the blade when it goes into the choil at an angle away from you, so that you can use that choke up into the finger choil without any danger of catching your finger on that corner of the blade. And that is, I believe, it's quite unusual. They've really thought that one through, made a good job of it. So anyway, the big thing about these knives, the thing that everybody always gets excited about, is the blade, and these blades are just phenomenal cutting machines. I know people say they're too expensive to use, but honestly, they're too expensive not to use. You have a tool which is a brilliant thing that lasts forever, well, significantly long anyway, in terms of both finish and its sharpness. It cuts, it's just beautiful to use, it's lovely in the hand, it's got enough heft to be solid, but it's no chore to carry. So why wouldn't you use it? I mean, really. Now, one of the things that's often criticised on Rocksteads is the clip. Now, I think it's slightly wrong, because these clips, although they may just be 420 steel, they work. It grips in clothes and in your pocket, but it's easy enough to get in and out of the pocket. Unlike some of the sort of machined metal clips, it just works well. Now, I suppose they're kind of criticised. People say, well, you could have a titanium clip like you have on a Sebenza. Well, I don't think you gain any great advantage from that. Titanium is not as good as a steel clip in terms of, you know, being a spring to work. And the rough finish on the bead blasted on titanium doesn't add anything to its effectiveness. These clips just work. But having said all of that, this knife, as you can probably see, doesn't have a clip. Instead it comes with a leather belt sheath. Personally, I think I probably prefer that. I'm not one for using clips. I don't particularly like them. But each to their own. Some people would count this knife out because it doesn't have a clip. I think it's nice. In terms of blade markings, I probably should point these out because as we go through the series, we'll see some interesting anomalies. It says the word Higo in you know, Western text, and then you have two kanji symbols, which are He and Go, surprisingly, which is four kanji symbols. They look like two, but they're four distinct ones. Sometimes they're written in a square with the first two and the upper left and upper right cantons, and the other two in the lower left and lower right cantons. But it says that's Higo in Japanese, and then it says Ishi Shi Go Roku, or 1456, which is the serial number. All of these knives are serialized. Then on the other side it just says Rockstead, and it has the Rockstead symbol. Now, I don't really know the full story behind the hole and the fuller. I think they're just design things. I mean, somebody said that they're to do with the way the blade's machined, and I suppose that is possible. I suspect if it is the case, then it's a case of they've used that because it's their kind of logo, if you like. All their blades have this groove. A groove like that, incidentally, we would probably call it a fuller in Japan. It would be called a hi, just spelled H-I, which I don't think has anything to do with Higo, but nonetheless, it is the same word or same spelling, H-I-He. So I don't really know what it means, but it's there. It's on all their blades. You've got this beautiful swedging. You've got the bead blasted part with the Rockstead on it, and then of course you've got the polished element, which is just phenomenal. There is no secondary bevel on these. It goes straight from what I would call a Shinogi line, where it goes from bead blast to polished, and it goes from there all the way down to the edge, with the gradient just increasing as it gets towards the edge. So there's no transition into a secondary bevel. It just goes down to the edge, and that is what's known as an apple seed edge in sort of blade grind parlance. It's the way that a Japanese samurai sword would have been polished in the day. They're sharpened to it. They're polished to an edge rather than being sharpened to an edge. It's one of the things that I think is particularly beautiful about these, but it's the sort of thing that most people probably wouldn't even notice or realise. But that's the way that a Japanese blade of old would have been sharpened, and still today. Oh, incidentally, the Rockwell testing, you can see the little divot just above my thumb there on the ricasso, just by the edge of the blade, and that's why they know that this one is 66.8 and not just around about 67. You know, a lot of knives, like Chris Reeves will tell you, the hardness is 58 to 59 HRC. Well, this one is a 66.8, no equivocation. Nice big symmetrical thumb studs. The way they're shaped, they get narrower as they get towards the blade, and they flare out a little bit, and then their level creates a sort of hollow that your thumb can sit in. The jimping is entirely irrelevant as a result. You're fitting between the liners and these studs, and it gives a really solid, comfortable grip. It's relatively round in the hand, but oval enough to give you perfect blade orientation. This is just a really, really nice knife. I like it very much. You know, would I swap it for my Higo 2? I don't know, actually, is a short answer. I think this one is certainly prettier. This is perhaps the everyday working version in my mind, but it's a toss-up between the two. When I bought this one, I very nearly bought that one. It was one or the other. I think the ZX7 blade seems to have worn better in my experience than ZDP189 because it's less chippy. The chips I've got in my Higo are sufficiently small that you need a magnifying glass to see them. But I do know that they're there, so it'd be hard to tell. But it's a toss-up. I would have either of these knives every day, and if I had a real choice in the world, I'd have them both. Unfortunately, this one will be going back by the middle of the week. So there we are, the Rockstead Higo in Desert Ironwood. A beautiful, beautiful knife. As I say, comes with a leather sheath, and it comes in the nice wee Paulina wood box that all Rocksteads come in. So thank you very much. If you like this stuff, please give it a thumbs up. I'd say this is the first of the first 6 of a series which will probably run to 50 or 60 knives over the next year or so. So if you want to see those, remember to subscribe and ring the bell if you want notifications. Thank you very much. Bye.